So while I'm getting myself together, it's like I was just thinking of this story from about 3 weeks ago, and about 3 weeks ago now, I'm sitting in my bedroom, and my wife's like talking to Bailey and Claire, and they're doing something with their hair. I don't know. They're doing something, and they got all the goop out. Mom, do my hair, and they're doing whatever, and the dog's sitting on the bed like always, and I was like, and they're putting mousse in their hair, and I'm thinking, hey, we should put mousse in Hank's hair and see what happens. And at that moment, Cameron walks in the room, and Cameron's got mild Asperger's, so you kind of never know what's on his brain half the time. And he walks in and goes, "We should not do that. He would crush Hank, or a moose would crush Hank." I'm like, and everybody in the room stops and goes, "What?" And we just like roll it back in our brain, and I'm like, "Oh, he thought moose the animal, not moose that you put in your hair." And he's like, "It's the same word." I'm like, "No, it has a different meaning." I don't know why that caught my brain. I was just like, "Oh, let's tell this story beforehand." But my title for today is Job, a Relatable Man. And which I know just the mention of the name Job is kind of a downer into itself. You got 40 chapters of, oh, my life is terrible. And and I had this message kind of like written out pretty much a couple of weeks ago, other than some conclusion stuff, because I kind of like to leave room for fresh thought and stuff going on. And with as busy as my life is, I tend to try and God kind of gives me messages early so I can kind of think on them and mull them around and whatever. And Friday night, something just felt a little off, and I was just like, this doesn't feel like it's almost done. It doesn't feel right. So on Saturdays, I normally get here at about 6:15 in the morning because I'm doing TV stuff and books for the church, and if I got stuff going on, like message I've got. So I mean, I'm literally in here at 6:15, and I got 2 computers going, and I got all the stuff going on, and I went, man, I just don't think this message feels right. So I took the entire first page, deleted it, and start over. Same topic, same everything. 30 minutes, typed it all out. It was done again. Same message, same topic, same, a lot of the same points. It's like I just didn't like how I had it set up. And the weird thing too is normally I'll print it up on Saturdays on my computer, and I'll look at it on Saturdays, and I'll kind of sit in bed on Sundays and I'll look at it. I literally didn't print it up until 7:30 this morning. Haven't looked at it since until 8 o'clock when I made some changes, which is weird for me because it's like I'm so super prepared for everything I try and do. And I went, oh God, am I prepared? And he's like, if you weren't, I would have told you. Because he's like, it's in your heart and your mind. If it wasn't, you would have been stressed out about it. But there was no point. I mean, yesterday was probably the most laid back day we've had in a long time. So it was like if I really needed preparation time, it was probably the easiest, most laid-back Saturday I've had in a year. And, it's like I thought about it. I mean, it was in my mind, and I'm going over it. And I'm like, wow, I guess I'm ready to go. And I woke up this morning, and I went, okay, I got to at least make sure I print this thing up, because it's going to be my luck, as I'm going to get all in a hustle, getting everything going. And I'm going to forget to print it up when I'm going to get to church and go, ugh, what am I doing? So my main text for today is Deuteronomy 31:8. I'm just going to read it, so if you want to write it down. It is the Lord who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. This verse actually it's found actually 2, 3, 4 more times in the Bible, and it's phrased a different way. I mean, it's even related to giving in the New Testament over and over and over. So it's kind of one of those things where God's told his people throughout time, you may feel alone, but I'm still there. And I've got to imagine that, most people enjoy have seen a television show, a movie, a play, read a book, and they all take up what's called the 3-act structure. I mean, I'm a TV production guy, so I understand the 3-act structure. Act 1 is the introduction. You get introduced to your main characters, and a person that's written a good book or a good movie, the hope is that you become somewhat attached to that character. Act 2 is the midpoint. It's called the confrontation. This is where all the bad stuff happens. These are all like the football player that's on his way to college, but then he like breaks his leg and he's got to come back from this injury to either play football again or find some other career. In Act 3 it's called climax, or the resolution, where everything hopefully gets fixed and your main character goes off happily ever after. It doesn't matter what you've seen. I mean, even in Jesus' life, he uses the 3-act structure: life, death, resurrection. And same story. I can honestly say that it feels like I've been going through a 3-act structure since I turned 40. I had all these plans before I turned 40. Turning 40, like with my cousins, the first thing I can remember about anybody turning 40 in my family was my uncle, because man, my cousin Mark, he's not going to see this, so I could care less if I use his name or not. He ragged on my uncle to no end about how old he was and needed to go get a pacemaker and all this sort of stuff. He's like 42, almost 43 years old. Now he's 42 now. And I was thinking when he turned 40, now it's your turn. Because now he's the guy that's got the Grizzly Adams beard and the gut and everything else. And he was the cool kid in high school. He was like the aspirational, kid in high school who's, you wanted to be this kid. And when I was in elementary, middle school, he was like, oh, this kid is like the top of the heap. And then I realized it now. No, he really wasn't. He had his own issues. But, and we've even moved to this point where it's like really 40 isn't over the hill anymore. It's, we hear all the time, 50 is the new 40, 60 is the new 50. I haven't heard yet. I haven't heard like 100 is the new 70. I was like waiting for that one. But, I turned 40 in June, and everything was kind of humming along pretty good. Most of the goals that I didn't want to just hit 40. I wanted to smash through 40. And so, a month before I turned 40, I ran a full marathon. That was one of my goals I wanted to accomplish. I wanted to read like 40 books over the course of that year transition. Did that. Read 60 books by the end of December. And, it's like I hit that. I was at 40 books in like August, September. I'm like, man, this is the greatest, this is turning into something big. And I've had this goal that I want to run the Boston Marathon. And by September, I was probably the fastest I've ever been, the best shape I've ever been. I was about 5, prepping to run the Eugene Half Marathon next year because I needed something competitive so I could see where I was at in this time to make sure I was there. And my times were within about, the first 13 miles, I was about hitting my Boston Marathon time. And, but all along the way, like August, September hit, and God kept kind of giving me this word in the back of my head that you got to prepare for this season of rest. I'm like, how the heck am I going to do that? I'm preparing for the Boston Marathon in the next couple of years. I've got, at the time we had like 7 kids at the time, and then everything that goes along with that, their activities in school and 60-hour work week, and I'm just like, I'll take that under advisement, God. Yeah. And even at this point, I'm just like, was he preparing me for it? It's like, it was kind of like a warning flag, because God knows that I'm a guy that I'm a prepared guy. So for him, if he shoots it out there early, just kind of wrap my brain around processing this, and I'm just like, all right, God, I'll take that under advisement. He's like, I don't know when this season's going to hit. It'll happen at some point. Apparently at some point was like the day before Thanksgiving. And, really that Thanksgiving through January 1st is like the most celebrated point in the year. If you think about it, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. There's more celebration and less work going on than any time in the entire year. So November 22nd, I get out of my work truck, and all of a sudden I'm in just like agony. Finish my first stop of the day, and I'm just like, this really hurts. Don't know what it is. So I drove from Veneta where it happened, and I drove all the way to Florence for my next stop. And it was on a Wednesday, day before Thanksgiving, and it's my shortest day of the week. So I'm like, I can just tough through this. So I've got a Fred Meyer stop in Florence and a Safeway stop in Florence, and got out of the truck again, and I'm just like, I felt my leg buckle. And I like grabbed the door, and I'm just like, whoa, what just happened? And I'm sitting there in my work truck, and I'm like, man, I'll be fine. Thanksgiving's tomorrow. Friday, I don't even really have any deliveries because the day after Thanksgiving's like our slowest day of deliveries, and I'm just like, just tough this thing out. So Thanksgiving happens, and I'm in pain. And I came back that Wednesday, and I went to the doctor. And I'm not a guy that takes, I hardly take ibuprofen ever. As a runner, you just like learn to suck this stuff up because you need to know how your body feels when you're running to know if you've fatigued yourself too much. So I don't take anything. So I'm like, meds are going to be great. Doctor's going to prescribe something for me, and because I don't take anything, it's just going to hit me like a ton of bricks, and I'm just going to go to sleep, and I'll be fine. Oh, no. Didn't work at all. Doctor gives me a prescription. He's like, this is like 5 ibuprofen. Great, 5 ibuprofen. Take it. Didn't do anything. Called the doctor's office back Friday. He doesn't really want to give you anything, and he really doesn't want to see you again, which is basically the message I got from the nurse. He's like, he wants you to really just go see the physical therapist, which wasn't scheduled till the following Wednesday. So, week in pain, nothing's working. I go see the physical therapist he's like, wow, your body's really not in good shape. And he's like, looks me over and stretches me out, and he goes, you've done something like, can't really tell you what you've done, but clearly you're in pain because you can't bend over. So I went to the doctor, and he started me this process, and I've pretty much gone to physical therapist every week since the 29th of November. And, progressively gotten better. But it's one of those things where, the physical therapist, I'm really glad I've got the guy that I've got. He's like a 26-year-old. He graduated from his medical school, all the stuff that he's got to do to be a physical therapist, like literally in last March. So he's 26 years old, super young. But all along the way, he's gone, oh, you're going to run again. You're going to run again. Not a problem. You're going to run again. This is just like something that's going on. And but then like a few days before Christmas, we went up to Great Wolf Lodge, and my body was feeling super strong. Like everything the physical therapist had done, it felt like I was getting back pretty strong, and I was there. And the day we left, or the day before we left, I sat in a chair that was was lower in one of those chairs and kind of at an angle. And I'm like, I better go back up to the room and see what everybody's doing. And I get up, and all of a sudden my back went out again. Boom. And I couldn't get out of the chair. Couldn't roll, couldn't sit up, couldn't move, didn't have any of my kids around. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, what the heck am I going to do? And finally I managed to my way up and get back up to the room. But sitting hurt a lot. And again, the doctors don't really want to give you anything strong anymore because with all the drug addiction going on now, they really are hesitant to prescribe anything. And none of them wanted to prescribe me anything. And they could see I was in pain, like dramatic pain. Pain to the point where when we came back that Christmas, I couldn't even get out of bed. It took me like an hour to even figure out how to get out of bed because if I turned left, it hurt. If I sat up, it hurt. Couldn't bend over, I couldn't do this. So, it was kind of an ordeal to get into bed. And I was like, I finally got into the bathroom to find something, and I'm just in tears because I'm like, well, where do I go from here? Because I'm stuck. What's my option? I got to pain my way back into bed. I got to pain my way back into this. And, finally I found this weird med combination of this extra strength something or other that I take 3 pills of that's over the counter that I basically found myself. So I'm like, I wouldn't say I'm self-medicating, but it's the only thing that worked at the time. And what happened is that I pulled the sciatic muscle that runs from my back all the way down to my leg. And the pain's never in the same place twice. So you go to physical therapy, and he'll work out my leg, and it'll move down to my foot, and then it'll move up to my leg, and it'll move down, and it moves down. And, all along the way, they're like, well, I took a week off from work, and the doctors are like, well, do you want us to just write us a note so that you can stay home longer? I'm like, no, I think I can make it. And then, because the one thing is and it was a work-related injury. So work's taking care of all the bills. It's all done. I don't have to worry about it. And, but the problem is I worked so much overtime that if workman's comp decides to start taking over, they pay me the equivalent of about 40% of what I make now. So my choice is struggle in pain or stay at home and figure out what to do and drain all of our savings so that I can stay home. So I said, I'm going to work. and then in January, they changed our compensation structure to where, I'd accumulate like 180 hours of sick pay. Well, without telling anybody, when they restructured all of our stuff, they sucked all that out because they were tired of too many employees were like hoarding it because they were legitimately not sick. And so I had another guy with me, and we had like hundreds of hours of sick pay. Hundreds. It would have been thousands of dollars worth of stuff, and I could have taken it. And then if I knew I was going to lose it, like now we went from the equivalent of like 4 weeks that I'd accumulated, I would have like 4 days. So if I would have known, I would have taken the whole month of December off and would have been done. And I would have just done it. And because they pay me my actual wage rate when I take my sick pay. So then January hits, and I'm looking at our new compensation structure, and I'm like, it says we have 3 days or 4 days of sick pay now. I'm like, nice of them to not tell anybody. Like, they went behind the curtain and told everyone, like, okay, so we continue on this path. And getting better. And, there's weeks where it's like, most weeks, it's like I wake up at 3:30, I'll take my 3 pills, get in my truck, and I'll be good until about noon or 1. And then the pain will come back because the sciatic nerve runs into my foot, and because I drive 1,200 miles a week. The physical therapist just discovered last week, he's like, oh, you know what? I think you're sitting too far back in your seat because your leg is outstretched and you're putting all that tension on your foot. Why don't you try moving your seat forward? Like just enough to where you can bend your knee and not have to do that. Within a week, all of a sudden, like half the pain just disappeared. Just from one little comment that he made. And it's getting better. It's getting better a lot. But at its worst, it get to the point where, because when I come back 3 times a week, I have to load my truck. But the pain had kicked back. And so I'd have to make sure that, and I can only take medicine twice a day. So I take my 1 in the morning, and I have to time it to where it's before an hour before I get to work. I get back with my truck to work, because if I don't, I'm in too much pain to load my truck. So it's all this stuff rolling in my head all the time. I got a million things going on. I got to like time out this medicine to make sure I can load my truck so I can get home and go do everything else. But finally now I'm to the point where the second dose really doesn't even happen anymore, because my body, after this one comment by my physical therapist about my foot, just all of a sudden like made it all disappear. And so now the pain just kind of sits in my lower back where the pain actually is, because what happens with your sciatic is the pain gets so overwhelming that your body goes into defense, and it wants to take the pain and take it from one central location and dump it somewhere else as fast as it can, because otherwise you would pass out. And which is why it goes down here and up and down. And so finally it's back to where it started. So I don't know if that's like a good thing or a bad thing, but but it finally feels like things are getting better. And the doctor's like, yeah, you're going to be able to get back to running and stuff again. And I'm like, well, I was like, I would honestly just like to be able to walk. Yeah. It's like, you're telling me I'm going to be able to run. It's like, I really just want to be able to walk. Yeah. And it's weird how much this guy like knows my case, because he's like, I've got a specialist coming in and I really want her to see you, because this is like, for me, it's like, I'm a really young doctor and I really want her to get a good look at you, just because this is so strange. You're in such great shape that you don't have any of this like stuff going on, but it's still lingering around. And she came in and she said the same thing he did. Oh no, you're going to be fine. You're going to get back to running again. But I had listened to another sermon by somebody who said that, one of the problems with like soccer players and football players is that they'll go through an injury and they'll get back to 100%, but they live in fear of re-injuring that thing. So like the cuts and slides and moves, they just won't do it anymore, because they're just so fearful of that injury coming back. And that's stuck in my brain. And I'm thinking, do I want to start running again? Because if I start, am I going to pull it again? So that's still rolling around in my brain. And God and I are kind of mulling that along. Because the doctor's like, I don't really want you doing any of that until June. And even at that, I want you to key it way down. I'm like, great. So you told me I can probably start again, but to keep it really light. And I'm like, I'm still mulling it with God. I was like, is this something I want to do again? I don't have an answer yet, and he hasn't really given me any guidance on it, but that's kind of where I'm at with that. But
You don't use it, you lose it.
exactly. And I can tell you, it's like, and I knew it because in the first, let's see, since November, so December, January, February, March, it's been like 3 or 4 months. It's like I've dropped like 7 pounds of weight, and it wasn't just like starving myself weight. It's because the muscle from all my legs is just gone like that because I haven't been able to use them. And so God and I are kind of still mulling that over. What are you going to do, or am I going to move on to something else, or whatever. And, and all along the way, it hasn't just been like physical stuff, because it's like, I remember standing in this pulpit like last year, and I think I told the story. It's like, the one thing in life is I don't doubt who God is. I don't doubt that He's my Savior and He wants the best for me. And there hasn't been like a moment in my life where I'm like, God, I doubt who You are. And I'm like, did I like, what is that thing they say? Tempt fate because you said it out loud, and so now the devil's kind of like deciding he's going to poke at me like he did with Job. And because it hasn't just been physical. It's like all along the way, it's like we had to put like a brand new motor in my wife's truck that went out. And that was a lot. Dishwasher went out. We just found out like, let's see. Oh yeah, and my wife turns 40 in November, so we're gonna go to Hawaii for her birthday. And if you get the tickets early enough, the rates are super low. If you get them like, so we got the airline tickets and hotel like a year in advance because the rates are like half. And then the next week find out, oh yeah, Jacob needs braces that cost more money than the motor in her car. And I'm just like, God, is this ever going to end? And it's like apparently I'm still in Act 2. And then followed up the next year after that, Bailey needs a set of braces at an unknown cost at this point. And it's just like, is this just going to end? Because it's like, it's like some of these things are like not directly happening to me. They're happening around me, but affect me. And then I was thinking the other day, it's like, okay, so we have, and as I'm writing this down, I'm like, okay, so I'm writing about the 3-act structure, and our life is a 3-act structure, and on the 7th of February, so what, a couple weeks ago, 10 days ago, I was 40 2/3 years old. I'm like, oh, so I'm like, okay, so God, this is 2 out of 3. Is this the end of the trouble of my 2nd act? I'm like, okay, so since the 7th, the 8th, and I'm thinking as things started feeling better since then, and I'm like, a little bit. It's like maybe this is the beginning of my 3rd act. And I was like, oh God, please be. And really it's like, I read 60 books last year. It's not going to be anywhere near that this year, because I decided to tackle this humongous book about Alexander Hamilton that is like taking me forever to read. And it's a good book, but it's so dense. It's just like it takes like the equivalent of 3 pages to read one, and I'm a big reader, but to get through 30 pages a day is tough. But I'll take that over everything else is going on. I'll take struggling through reading a book. But and I've spent a lot of these last few months, I've been reading that, I've been repeating the verse that, He will be with me. He will not leave me. He will not forsake me. Don't fear, don't be dismayed. Because it's just like, I wouldn't say I've gotten into like any form of depression, and nothing against people that do. It's not a guy who I am. I'll tell you that I had a boss tell me once that you backpack a lot of stuff, Jeff, that you just like, you take on weight. And the weight either melts or you break through or you just explode because you've taken on too much weight. So for me, it's not really a depression thing. It's just I accumulate, stuff. And gosh, man, I thought I was a tough guy before, but it's like with all this pain and hit me, it's like where my, I guess we'd say your body idle at 0. It's like for the last few months, my body idle's been the equivalent of like 20% higher than that. So that's where I started my day. my day was about a 20% higher idle, in my body, and it just got worse from there. So it's just like I'm already starting with the stress on my body, and then you add any amount of life that hits on top of it, and it's just like a struggle over and over and over and over and over. But it's gotten easier. I say I'm probably down to about, my start of my day is probably at about 5. And man, I'll tell you one thing, is like where I thought I was strong before, it's like my what do they call that? The amount of pain level that I can take physically, once was probably a 10, is because the doctor always asked me, like, where's your pain reading today? And the first day I came in, I'm like at a 12, and every time she'd come in, and I'd be like, I'm like at a 9, and she's like, well, at least that went down. And I'm like, wow, a 9. And I'll tell you, my 9, if I threw my 9 on one of my kids, it would probably incapacitate one of them. It just hits so hard. But it's like your body, eventually, what do they say, mind over body or whatever it is, you just get so used to it being there that it takes, just like over time your body gets used to medicine and you have to take more of it, which is why we've got this opioid epidemic. But it's like the pain level, you can take more if it comes. So like where 10 was before, it's probably closer to a 7 now. And man, I really don't want to experience that ever again in my life. But we're going to move on to Job. So we're going to kick into Job chapter 1, verse 1 through 5. And then we're going to read 2, 9, and 10. So we're going to read them back to back, and then I'll start it on Job after that. And we're doing really good for time. In the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys, and had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the East. His sons used to take turns holding feasts in their homes, and they would invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When a period of feasting had run its course, Job would send and have them purified. Early in the morning, he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. This was Job's regular custom. And then we're going to skip forward to Job 2, verses 9 and 10. His wife said to him, are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die. He replied, you are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? In all this, Job did not sin in what he said. From what most people know about Job, it's a pretty basic understanding. He was a good guy. The devil wanted him. God gave him to him. His life was a mess for 40 chapters, and in the end, God gave him more than had been taken by the devil. That's basically most people's understanding of who Job was. But Job wasn't just a good guy. Even if we go back and look at this, Job was so concerned about not himself, but his kids, that they go for, they called it a season of feasting or whatever it was. Said he wasn't there. He had no idea what was going on. It'd be the equivalent of your kid going out on a Friday night or all weekend, doing whatever they're doing, and then come Monday morning, you go out in their stead and go, dear God, forgive them for whatever they've done, whatever indiscretions they've done. Forgive them. It really was, it was a physical act of repentance for what we kind of do in our hearts when we talk to God. And I don't know why this caught my mind, but I was thinking as soon as I read this, what popped in my mind was, man, if they were still doing this, it would either smell like a slaughterhouse at my house or smell like a hole-in-the-wall barbecue. Yeah. I don't know why that popped into my brain. But going into this message, I actually I listened to all of Job, all 42 chapters of it in my work truck. And about 5 chapters a day, I listened to it over a couple of weeks. And it's really interesting when you hear someone read it to you versus when you read it yourself. And because it really is a story that could be like anything that any of us have had happen in our lives on some level. I mean, just because you haven't gone through what I've gone through doesn't mean that your pain is any less than mine.
That's right. That's right.
That,
Good word.
going back to my analogy of the 3-act structure. You watch a movie or a TV show, and one of the main characters, I'd say more in like a biblically based movie, they'll go, how can you believe in a loving God? That's they ask over and over. That, you love God when he's good, but you don't hate him when he's bad. How come you can't blame God? How come you can't give God the bad? Or how come you can't blame him for the bad stuff that happens? And I even heard it on, I can't remember what I was listening to. It was something on the news. And it was, what was the quote? But it was, the quote was, why do you give God the glory for the good, but not the disdain for the bad? Because it's like you're putting your head in the sand that it's not his fault. In my mind, it's like I've grown up in church my entire life. I don't know the Bible by heart, but I know what God's preached to me over that time. It's like, whether or not I liked it, I've spent my entire life in church. It's like, honestly, when I was in middle school, I'd rather be at home watching football. Honestly, on a Sunday, it's just like, okay, I know this game's going to be on at noon. We got to get out of church and go home now. And that was really my Sundays. But my parents made sure I went to church every single Sunday. And so, I had I don't even know if I call it a relationship. I knew who God was. I had a knowledge of God. I like that. I had a book understanding of who God was. And, but at some point, with all the parents taking me to church, parents in their relationship with God, and my parents never really tried to tell me what my relationship with God should be. It was just kind of, they modeled it. And so at one point, it just clicked. Couldn't tell you what that day was or why it was, but it was just a click where it was like, God is real, and he's my Savior, and he wants the best for me. And that's just kind of the way it is. I couldn't tell you what day it was. It's just been kind of how I try and live my life. And it's like and I've never had like one of those moments where I've fallen away from God, but I'll tell you there's moments where the fire kind of burns low, and I need to restoke it. And I'm sure we've all gone through that. Amen. It's hard to keep God at 100 all the time. It's just hard. When you go to work and you've got whatever it is that you're doing, it's hard to keep God pray without ceasing. It's hard to do that when you're sitting at a cash register, or you're driving a truck, or you're working in a school, or you're working, whatever your job is. It's hard to do that. So there's those seasons that we go through. But, page 3. But, and I'm sure I've said it up here before, is I consider myself a relatively boring person. I don't do anything exciting. I don't rock climb, and really up until November, running was like the biggest thing that I did on any given, event, and to have that taken away from me was kind of really hard. And but with all this going on, and it's like right now I got 9 kids in my house. It's not like I couldn't just shut down, sit in a room and go, man, this really hurts. Man, this really hurts. Man, this really hurts. One, I can't imagine anybody around me wants to hear it. It's like, okay, I'm sorry, Jeff, that it really hurts, but I've got to get the girls to Girl Scouts. I'm sorry that really hurts, but we got to make dinner. Or, on and on. So for me, it's just like everything else. I just backpack it. I just throw it on there and go. I really wouldn't want to hear it, so I'm just going to kind of, I don't like the word internalize it, because it's just there. It's not one of those things where I go, oh, I hurt so bad all the time. It's just, it became it's been just kind of part of life. Very good. And, in all honesty, I was thinking about this, is like, I don't know if kids need or want to really hear how much pain their parents are going through. I can't imagine, there's enough, I wouldn't say there's enough going on in life, but it doesn't do them any, solid help. It's not going to, help them get through school knowing how much things stink. Or, and it's one of those things. So for me, it's just like, I just don't bother telling him, because, like Cameron with his Asperger's, every single day he says, Dad, how was work today? Every day. It's like it's rare when he doesn't ask me. And at first it got kind of old because like after day like number 45 of him going, "How was work today, Dad? How was your truck?" And you're trying to think of new stuff every day, and it's just like, "It was fine. It was good. Yeah, everything was good." And then now it's kind of molted into that every couple of days he'll say, "Dad, how's your back today? Are you feeling any better today?" And I'm going, "Oh, it's gotten a little better, Cameron. Thank you for asking." And because it's strange about Cameron, because Cameron is like, he is such an introvert. I mean, if he says 50 words a day, it's amazing. But amongst his 50 words are, "How was your day, Dad?"
That's awesome.
And and with all the stuff that's going on with the kids, and some of my kids are just like so much higher stress level than others. It's like, right now, in the public eye, there's, the Me Too movement, #MeToo. In my house, I think the kids have started their own hashtag. It's been going on for years. It's called #MeFirst. Everything's top priority. Oh, I have to do this, or I need this, or it's like, really? If it takes away from anything that either goes in their mouth or in front of their eyeballs, they don't care. If you take away something that's going to go in their mouth or their eyeballs, then everything's an emergency. Dad, I need a power charger for my tablet. And then that becomes an emergency. Find me a power cord. I'm like, I really just don't care. I really don't care. I mean, the kids don't want to hear that, really, January when I had to go back to work after all my vacations and holidays and everything going on, that for me to get out of bed, I had to like roll a certain way. And I had to like take 3 pills every day. My kids don't know what's going on with me physically other than Dad's got a doctor's appointment. And
It didn't just drag you out. You have 9 of them. They can do it.
yeah. And, really in December, it was one of those things, just because I'm going all the time, it's like, normally cleaning up the house is just one of the chores that the kids and I do when I get back from work. And when I couldn't bend over it, it was funny. We were still cleaning the house, but Dad wasn't doing anything. It would be, "Jacob, pick that up, put it there, pick that up, pick that up. And we watch around, and it's like, "I'm going to tell you what we're going to do, and you're going to do it." So they stand beside me, and I'm like, "You're doing this, pick this up." So we still did it. It was just, Dad wasn't participating quite as much. Job in the first 2 chapters was a model believer. Believed in God. Everything was because God had blessed him. No doubts. God was God. He sacrificed for his kids. It was all about them. It was, his key worry, the good stuff in his life really occurred in the first chapter and the last chapter.
Yeah.
You got 41 chapters of everything terrible that happened to Job. And, Job went after his life and said, "How can I, shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" And all this, Job did not sin in what he said. So in all this that went on, it was easy. Oh, he was such a strong man. But the one thing Job had one of the worst support structures of all time. He may have had a great relationship with God, but man, he could not pick a spouse and could not pick his friends. His wife said, "Curse God and die." And all of his friends are like, "Clearly you've done something wrong. Clearly." And for a couple chapters, Job, I guess you could say, confronts God and says, "God, whatever I've done, forgive me. I'm on my hands and knees. Whatever I've done, forgive me for what I've done. Take it away from me so I can go back to this life." And finally God shows up and God says, "How dare you doubt, God? Who are you to say, who I am, the creator of the universe?" And we're actually going to go to Job 42, 1 through 6, and we're going to read his comments. So 1 through 6. Then Job replied to the Lord, "I know that you can do all things. No plan of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this that obscures my counsel without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. You said, 'Listen now, and I will speak. I will question you, and you shall answer me.' My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes." So very quickly, because of who Job was in the past, it was very quick for him to seek repentance. So he spent, once all of his wonderful relatives and friends finished pounding him with a baseball bat, telling him how terrible he obviously must be. They could never find anything. But, Job started becoming a believer because you get enough negative thoughts poked in your life, you start to believe it. And, but, the one thing back into it said, even with what Job said, he did not sin in his heart. So Job, after all this, was very quick to, I don't know if this would be the right phrasing, but say forgive God, as God forgave him. Because God didn't strike back and say, Job, you doubted who I was. Yeah, I'll take the pain away, and you're just going to kind of become a solitary man, and you'll be okay. God said, okay, I'm going to give you back twice what I took from you. He had another wife, he had more kids, he lived another 100 some odd years, and moved on. And seasons feel like that. They feel like the book of Job. Happy at the beginning, long periods of sadness, and some happiness at the end. Repeat. That's kind of how life seems at times. Repeat. Act 1, 2, and 3. Repeat. But the one thing that Job didn't have, because like I said, is that he had a terrible support system. I mean, I don't want to say terrible wife, terrible friends. And God dealt with the friends. I mean, he called them out by name, and they got dealt with. But the one thing that I've got that Job didn't have is that I've got a Bob. Is that all along the way, and I didn't ask him to, is that Bob, literally every time I've seen Bob, but mainly on Sundays, comes back and goes, how you doing, Jeff? Where does it hurt? Let's pray for you right now. Every day. And I'll tell you, the one time he didn't do that was last week because I didn't realize Bob wasn't here. Because I got to thinking when I was in the back room, I'm like, oh, Bob hasn't come and found me today. And, I've also got Joseph. I got two guys that whatever I'm going through, they'll just step up and go, all right, let's pray right now, right here. Doesn't matter in the middle of the service, back room. That's what Job didn't have. Job didn't have a Bob. Job didn't have a Joseph. And I'm glad I do, because it helps, even if it's only for that moment and for that day. And in some ways, I'll go, okay, God, they prayed for me. Where's my healing right now? Clearly, you sent them to talk to me. Where's my healing right now? And, and I remember all along the way, sometimes it's a season. God said it was going to be a season. I'm like, and then I'm thinking to myself, well, wait a minute. We're 2/3 of the way through. Are we done with Act 2? Are we moving into Act 3? And, I conclude with this. I've gone through, and, I'm still going through one of the toughest times probably in my entire life. But I haven't given up. John F. Kennedy said, we take on challenges not because they're easy, but because they are hard. For me, pain doesn't have to equal depression. It doesn't have to equal because from depression it can only get worse. And so for all this time in my life that I thought I had this boring Christian walk and boring relationship with, I wouldn't say boring relationship with God, but there haven't been a lot of ups and downs as far as my relationship with God. What it really did was created a really strong foundation, just like Job. When all the tough times hit, I had something to rely on, something to go back on, because I'll tell you, a lot through this has helped me understand how other people feel when they're going through, I wouldn't say similar situations, but they're going through depression, or they're going through just really deep life struggles and body struggles. And it's not the same as mine, but I'll tell you what my mind says is, man, you guys really need God, because for me, even if I'm not at 100 and I feel like I'm at 50, you guys feel like you're at 0, because your sense of where you normally are is at like 50. Just good enough. Just good enough to get to work. You got friends and you're doing what they're doing. But when life really gets tough, and, for like me, Bob prays for me when I'm feeling low or when I walk in the door. But what about that person that's sitting in their home and they're at their lowest?
That's right.
Physically, mentally, where do I go from here? Where do I go from here? We can sit back and go, why does suicide happen? I can, because they don't have a boat. Because I honestly see it. God is the only, at points, it's like that's the one string I've got is, God's still there. I've got an Act 3. Some people just think that they're stuck in Act 2.
That's right. That's good. That's
That
right.
they've already lived their Act 1. That they had their youth and they had their fun and their bodies feeling good and everything else. But you hit that point in your life where for a long time, where you're struggling and struggle, you get lower and lower and lower and you hit that point. So when people sit there and go, how is suicide even an option for you? This may sound really weird, as I get it. I'm not for it,
That's right.
but I at least understand it.
That's right. That's right. That's good.
That struggles are real.
That's right.
So if people ask, why do you believe in Jesus? Why do you do what you do? I was like, literally, he's probably saved my life.